Thanks, guys, for coming. Today we're going to talk about how to build an analytics infrastructure for growth. And I know there's a lot of different types of businesses here. And so what I'm going to start off doing is keeping it kind of at a high level, and then we can drill down on some specific questions as we get further along. So we'll do a little introduction. We have a kind of 9-step program that we use in our company. I'm going to walk you through what that looks like today. And then finally, we'll do a Q&A. So I'm Ryan Kuntz. I'm the CEO of Mammoth Growth. I've been in the Valley since '97. Been involved in a lot of startups. All those startups were related and worked really because we took a very fine and detailed approach to data, going all the way back to figuring out early viral coefficients and other things like that. And found that in today's marketplace, we're all thinking about that and wanting to apply it to more than just the companies that we're building internally. So I'll give ourselves a little quick blatant plug, and then we won't talk about us anymore. We're Mammoth Growth. We've been around about 2 years. We help companies figure out what questions to ask, how to get the metrics to answer those questions, how to instrument their site, how to audit and normalize data, and then do all the reporting. And so we're really like an outsourced BI team as a service for companies like yours. Okay, cool. So a couple semantic things. When we talk about analytics, or we talk about growth marketing or growth hacking or whatever we're going to call it, typically there's words that we need to use. And so I just want to talk a little bit about normalizing some of the vocabulary I'm going to use today so that you guys aren't confused. We're going to talk about analytics as just really the discovery and collection of data. So I'm going to use the word analytics a lot. And what I mean by that is we're going to be aggregating data somewhere, collecting it, analyzing it, and then disseminating it. All right, so 9 steps for success. First is to build a data-oriented organization. First thing is identify the expert in your organization, right? So inevitably what happens is you decide you need data, or you have a marketing program, or you have an analytics software that you purchase, and you point at a marketing manager and say, here, go figure it out, okay? Well, it's probably not his or her full-time job, and she probably figured out how to do it that day, and then went back to all her other jobs, and then 2 weeks later had to go back and look at how to do that again and forgot. And so you have a lot of inefficiency in the organization by not having somebody that's specialized on surfacing and providing the data that's most important to you. So expanding on that, if you're a VP or a CEO and you are in the reporting tool and extracting data, that's usually a bad thing. And you need to find a way to solve that. Same thing when I talked about, if you have people in the organization that are maybe at a manager level that are maybe have more time on their hands, and you ask them to go do that, in a lot of cases, you're actually just setting them up to fail. And so let's create an environment where we're not setting people up to fail. We want to create an environment where we set people up to succeed. And then my favorite is if you're an engineer and marketing people or other people in the organization are like, just look it up in the database, right? So anytime you have that situation, which happens a lot, your companies probably need some organizational thought around creating a dedicated person in the organization. So dedicate someone to analytics reporting, make it part of their job description or job requirement, and then you'll find that you have a lot more relevant and timely information. So who are these people? Like who's going to be my growth analyst? I mean, if you look at the job descriptions in the Valley for data analysts, growth hackers, whatever, you're going to get probably out of 100 different job descriptions, 100 different requirements. And so I'm just going to make a few recommendations here as you're thinking about who these people are. First of all, most good growth analysts understand product. They've worked within product. They understand the product development cycle, because frequently you can't instrument a system without knowing how all the pieces fit together. Okay. Second thing is, I think there's a tendency to believe that we have to have an engineer as a growth analyst, and I would say that that's, in our experience, and particularly with the analysts that we hire, that's not always the case. They do have to be extremely detail-oriented, right? So I want to look at a report and get data in one place. I want to get data in another place. I want to correlate the data and check it and make sure that we're not off by any percentage, right? And so you need people that are willing to dive in and provide that kind of commitment to making sure that everything's accurate and correct. Okay, so cadence. So now I've got my person in the organization that is able to do this stuff. And how do I support them so that they can be good at their jobs? Well, the first thing we run into is panicking over small sample sizes. So you have a report, you're looking at your report, 10 people showed up, 2 people did something, oh my God, it's 20%, right? Well, no, it's not really 20%. It's really what's the sample need to be in order for that to be relevant. And so want to create an environment where people don't expect to have to report to you on small sample sizes. Second thing is baseline reports that everyone believes is extremely important. So imagine you have reports and one person in the organization or multiple people in the organization say, yeah, we have this report, but we're not sure it's right. Okay? And so anytime you have bad data or unbelievable data, it's going to create problems for the person that's supposed to pull that for you. Designing thoughtful tests is extremely important. So I have my data, I believe my data, I want to create tests, and I want to create a cadence around those tests so that we're not panicking in the organization about the data. And so we like 1 to 2 week test sprints. So we have an idea, we look at the data, we come up with more information or more ideas around that data, we implement a test, we come back and do it again. It creates a cadence where everybody knows that, oh, we're going to have some results. The results will be on Tuesday. And I can look at them and I can make some decisions about the information that's been provided from those results. And then, of course, rinse and repeat. Once you start it, stay on top of it. Don't just drop it. All right, cool. So step 2. Now I've got my person in the organization. It's great. And I know that I'm going to be able to pull these reports and I'm going to be able to access the information. But the question is, what information do I need to access? Right? So we are in a metrics-driven society or metrics-driven business environment, right? And so the question is, well, what are the right metrics? Well, we don't really want to answer metrics. We want to answer business questions. And so the key here is to think about your business and think about answering the business questions that matter. And so what we recommend is that your business questions should drive your analytics roadmap, okay? That means getting everybody around a table, along with your dedicated person, and saying, what is our business? How are we going to attack our business? What are the things that we need to know in order to be successful? And then thinking about, from there, what the metrics are that are going to drive that growth. Second thing is, don't assume everybody in the organization knows what's important. So you have marketing and sales or manufacturing or whatever. Everybody needs to come together and talk about the things that are most important in the business. We all say we do this, and we have board meetings, and we have retreats, but rarely do we actually come out of those things with a cohesive set of questions that we need to answer in order to grow our business. And then I think the other thing is when you think about these different business questions, you do actually want to break them down by functional product area, right? So engineering is going to have business questions that need to be answered in product and sales and marketing and manufacturing. Want to make sure that all those are addressed and that everybody at the table knows what they are so that we can create a cohesive thought pattern around the different questions that need to be answered. And then finally, and this is probably the hardest thing, is you don't need to have 200 questions to start with. Focus on the top 10 or 15 things that will really move the needle for your business and focus in on those. Because if you have 200 questions you need to answer, your dedicated resource is going to be overwhelmed and you're going to end up with none of them. All right, so the big cheat is anytime you're talking about a metric, you can say, what business question are we trying to answer? And if you use that religiously, I guarantee you that you will have do a better job at driving the conversation around how to build growth through your metrics. All right, so documenting your business questions, just some examples. You have these in the slides. So customer acquisition, what are my site visits per channel? How much money did I spend per free trial conversion, right? So attribution questions, conversion questions, retention questions. What's our revenue per site visit by engagement campaign, right? How many photos did a user download and their free trial by cohort, right? These are all questions that are going to answer things in your business that will help you move the needle. And then I would take those questions and break them down into actual formulas or things or metrics that people in your organization can understand. Okay, step 3, document key metrics and definitions. So now you've gone through this process, you have your person, you understand what business questions you need to ask, and you're going to go and actually document the metrics that are going to help you get to the answers. Finally, figure out a data collection framework based on what you need to track and how you need to track it. So I'm going to kind of cover a couple things today. We can talk more about this in the Q&A. One of the most prevalent tracking mechanisms now that's happening is identify and track. You've probably seen it. Mixpanel uses it, Kissmetrics uses it, Segment uses it. Most of the marketing automation tools are doing some variation on this. And it's basically not just to measure what happened, but who did it. And then the alternative is obviously dumping everything into a data warehouse, right? So I've got a data warehouse. I'm going to store my data. It's going to be in Redshift or Postgres or SQL. And we're going to be able to query that data directly. And so there's the two strategies. And you can do both, right? And so when we think about identify and track, what's cool about it, if you haven't seen it, is that what we're going to do is take a user identity, and we're going to put traits on that user. So I'm Ryan. I live in San Francisco. And I showed up at SoftTech today, which was my event. And on that event, I can have properties. And the time was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was here for an event, and I did a bunch of things. And what this does is it allows me to pull that data into a variety of places where I can use it, and I can pull the information off of each of these touch points and apply it in a variety of ways, whether it's marketing automation, or whether it's analytics, or whether it's showing a different element on a landing page. It's really cool. And then step 5, okay, now I know that I'm going to store the data. Based on that, I'm going to pick some tools, okay? And so what's interesting is even if you're using something like Segment, or you've decided to create a model where you're going to use identify and track and not just dump everything into a data warehouse, the way that these tools consume that data is actually different. So Kissmetrics consumes data differently than Mixpanel. It's subtle, but it matters. A/B testing, you've got things like Optimizely, Visual Website Optimizer, Taplytics. Attribution, we've got Attribution App, Branch, Tune, Apps Flyer. There's a lot actually. Analytics, Kissmetrics, Amplitude, Mixpanel, Heap, list goes on. CRM, almost every, I don't know, there are probably some people in here without Salesforce, but we see Salesforce 95% of the time. Marketing automation, referrals. And thinking about what tools you choose will actually require you to think about how you structure that data. And if you have multiple tools, you want to even put a little bit more thought into it. So what we're going to do, you probably can't see this, but we're going to create an analytics schema. And so the basic idea is that, imagine you're thinking about your product and you're going to write user stories. This is what you would give to the engineer, right? So we're going to have an event name. We're going to have when that event was triggered. We're going to have the properties that we're going to store on that event so that we can use them in the different tools. And then what's important is we're actually going to have a description on this. And so this is an extension of what we did when we talked about documenting our metrics. We're going to document all of our events and all of our identity traits in an analytics schema because the engineers are going to end up loving this document because this is how they're going to implement the event layer in your system. All right, so now we know what we're going to do, and we have to get somebody to go do it. And this is usually the biggest pain point. Everybody has an engineering team with a backlog that probably goes back 4 months. And so you're the marketing guy or the product guy or the CEO, and you walk in and say, okay, guys, I got this. I just paid for all this stuff, and now I need it to work. This is probably the most important part of the exercise because people assume that the data that's come in is correct. So what we need to do is a very rigorous audit on the data. So is 1 + 1 = 2? And let's get to that data in a variety of ways. Okay, so first thing is set it all up on your staging environment first. It's an extra step, but it'll matter. It won't be like tons of production traffic funneling in. They have to sift through, and you're pausing your debugger and trying to find it. You can do a single action, and you can watch that action come in, and you can track it and optimize it if you need to. You want to make sure that all the events are collected in all the right places and all the right devices. So if you have your mobile app and an SDK in that, and you have your website, you have IoT, and you have Internet of Things, you need to make sure that the data is actually coming in from all the sources because frequently what will happen is it'll come in from 3. It won't be in the 4th. You won't be able to unify the identities, and then you're not going to have a full picture of what's happening. And then, of course, you're not going to have, particularly if you're using event data, or even if you're dumping things into a data warehouse, you want to be able to take certain elements and compare it to your actual production database. So did I have this many registrations in a time frame? Did I have this many purchases? Was this the dollar value purchases that I think is right? And you want to make sure that those things compare. Because frequently what happens is you look at a date range, and they don't compare, and you need to figure out why. Now, 90% of the time it's because you're looking at things in 2 different time zones. But if that's not it, then you need to figure it out. Okay, great. We have our data. We know it's right. We audit it. We're going to throw everything into production, and we're going to be able to start generating baseline reports. Baseline reporting for growth organizations is really, really important. It puts everybody on the same page. It says this is our conversion rate, this is our sales rate, this is our price per sale, this is our attribution model, this is whatever it is. And it gives you something to talk about internally, and it gives you a way to create goals that you can beat. And so as an executive, once everybody's on the same page with the baseline reporting, you can say, look, that conversion rate on that landing page from that traffic source is 17%, and we need to make that better. We need to make that 25% better, and we have a way to measure that. That potentially before, you were just talking about we need to make our conversion rates better, right? So think about it as we're going to create baseline reports, we're going to agree to what those reports are, and then we're going to optimize against those reports so that everybody's talking the same language. And that goes into, we talked a little bit about the cadence in the beginning. You can take advantage of that stuff, and you can create these optimization sprints that will allow you to take the data, take the reports, and then focus on those things in your sprints to create growth.